Chapter 9. Invitation to Dinner. Section 1.
In the travel agency where Mary works, there's a young French lady called Yvette, whose husband René works for Air France. They've been living in London for about 6 months, and both of them speak English quite fluently, though not always accurately. One day, Yvette invited Mary and Arthur to have a meal with her husband and herself at their flat, which was a stone's throw away from where Arthur and Mary lived. This was the first time that Arthur and Mary had been invited round to someone else's home for a meal, and they were both looking forward to it eagerly. When the evening in question arrived, Arthur and Mary went round to their French friend's flat at about 8 o'clock, and were received by René, who showed them into the living room and offered them an aperitif. Yvette came in to welcome them shortly afterwards, but went back to the kitchen almost immediately so that she could get on with preparing the meal. They had just finished their aperitifs when Yvette came back with some food on a tray and invited them to sit down at the table. She gave them each a small dish containing an artichoke. Arthur and Mary had often seen artichokes in the greengrocers' shops before, but never actually got round to trying them. Arthur glanced at Mary somewhat anxiously because he had no idea what to do with his artichoke or where to start eating it. Eventually, Yvette guessed that her two friends didn't quite know how to eat it, so she started stripping off the leaves and dipping them into the melted butter. The rest of the meal was equally delicious. Arthur was so impressed that on the way home he told Mary she ought to learn how to cook a few French dishes. Before they left, Mary had invited their hosts to come and have a meal with them the following week.
Dialogue.
Oh, come on, Arthur. Do open the door. I'm catching my death standing here.
I can't find the key. Ah, here it is.
That's better. I'll just turn the gas fire on.
Ooh. What about a drink before we go to bed? Do you fancy a sandwich or anything?
I'd love a drink, but I couldn't eat another thing. I must say, Yvette's a marvellous cook, isn't she? I really did enjoy that meal.
Yes, she certainly does know how to cook. I wonder if they eat like that every day.
Well, they do say that the French love their food, don't they?
Got any ideas about what to cook yourself when we have them back? I don't think they'd appreciate egg and chips very much.
Oh, now come on, Arthur. It's not very often that I give you egg and chips. I'm trying to think. I'm rather dreading the thought of it, to tell you the truth. I honestly don't know what to give them. Where's that cookery book of ours?
What?
You know, the one Mrs. Harrison gave us as a wedding present.
Oh.
Now, where did I put it?
Well, if you don't know where to look, I should think the bookcase might be a good place to start.
Oh, do be serious, Arthur. Oh, yes, here it is. Oh, dear. Well, these recipes all look marvellous, but they take so long to make I'd never have time to eat them.
Let's think of something simpler.
OK. What shall we have for starters?
Soup? Melon?
Oh,
Prawn cocktail? Grapefruit?
how unimaginative can you get? I know. What about corn on the cob with butter? I know how to make that. It's very easy and it's in season now.
Yes, all right. What about the main course?
I think we ought to have something really English, don't you? What about roast lamb with mint sauce, roast potatoes and veg?
Yes, that's a good idea. You do that quite well, actually.
Oh, thank you very much. Have you got any ideas about a sweet?
What about apple pie? Or banana fritters?
No, I don't think either of those are any good. For one thing, I wouldn't like to inflict my pastry on anyone, let alone my friends.
Oh.
And if I serve banana fritters, it means I'll have to get up in the middle of the meal to make them and probably get my dress splashed in oil.
Oh, well, I don't know then. I'll leave it to you. I'm sure you'll think of something. I'm not very keen on puddings in any case.
I think I'll just serve up some strawberries and cream, and we'll finish up with cheese. Stilton or Wensleydale or something.
That sounds all right. Anyway, I'm for bed. I've got to get up early in the morning.
Chapter 10. Tourists in London. Section 1.
Arthur was just about to finish the first year of his course in management. The summer vacation was drawing near, and because he'd spent most of his grant, he thought that whatever else he did, he'd better get a vacation job. The college notice board had details of quite a few jobs, but the ones he'd seen so far hadn't appealed to him very much. The only two jobs which Arthur felt he could do without dying of exhaustion were guiding foreign tourists around London and the home counties and standing outside Piccadilly Circus Underground station asking people what soap, shampoo, bath salts or whatever they used. That is, doing market research for a company producing toilet preparations. The former paid more money, but Arthur felt that he wouldn't have much chance of getting it, as he wasn't a Londoner, and didn't feel particularly qualified to do it. So on the morning of the last day of term, he went to see the full-time secretary of the Students' Union at the Poly and asked her how he should go about applying for the market research job. She told him she was rather busy at that moment, so he'd better leave it with her and come back in the afternoon. When he went back to see her, she told him she'd made an appointment for him to see a Mr. Coombs in room 407 in Fitzroy House in the Barbican in the City of London at 10 o'clock the following morning. Arthur managed to get there on time for his interview and was welcomed by Mr. Coombs. He started asking him lots of questions about London, and it gradually dawned on Arthur that he wasn't being interviewed for the market research job at all. While he was wondering whether he had better explain the misunderstanding, he was offered a job and asked if he could start the following day. He had to pick up a party of American tourists at 9 o'clock in the morning to take them to Hampton Court and Windsor Castle.
Dialogue.
Is everybody on then, mate? We should have left 20 minutes ago, you know. We'd better not be late for lunch again.
Hang on a minute, I'll just see. Could you all sit down, please, so I can just count you? 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. There's a couple missing, I think. Why ever can't they get back on time?
Who are we waiting for?
Don't know yet. Whoever it is, I could cheerfully murder them. Anybody know who it is that's missing?
Wherever we go, there's always someone we have to wait for.
It's Wilma and Mary Lou, I think.
Isn't that them, taking photos of each other by the gate there? Well, hadn't you better go and get them?
Yes, I suppose so. Oh, they're coming at last. Come on, ladies. We haven't got all day, you know. We'll never get to Windsor at this rate.
Those two are always keeping us waiting. Do you remember in Paris, honey, or was it in Rome? We had to wait at least 20 minutes outside the Leaning Tower.
Sorry, folks. Do you know who we've just been talking to? There was somebody from Temperance, Illinois. Young man, would you and the driver please just come out while I take a snapshot of you both? Mary Lou and I are dying to have one of you both.
Whatever next.
No, I'm sorry, ladies. We really must be off. Wait till we get to Windsor. Here, let me give you a hand into the coach.
Oh.
There we are.
Right. Can we go now?
Yes, that seems to be everybody.
Okay. If you'll just close the door, we'll be off.
Where are we heading for now?
Windsor.
Oh, is that where the old castle is? You know, I'm just crazy about old castles. We don't have any back home, you know.
Yes, they are quite interesting, I suppose.
Isn't that where the Queen lives? Do you think we'll have a chance to see her?
Well, I wouldn't count on it if I were you. We'll know if she's staying there because wherever she is, you can see the Royal Standard. That's a sort of flag flying on the roof.
Chapter 11. Holiday in Wales. Section 1.
At the end of the third week in August, Arthur, having made a reasonable amount of money, guiding tourists around London and elsewhere, decided he didn't need to do any more work for the rest of the vacation. Instead, he thought he would take Mary away somewhere for a holiday. While walking down Earl's Court Road one day, he happened to bump into a fellow student of his by the name of David Jones. Arthur asked him what he'd been doing over the vacation. David told him that he'd been staying with some other students in a cottage in Wales belonging to his aunt. Arthur thought that this would be a good idea for their own holiday, so he asked David if he happened to know whether it would be free or not. David promised to phone his aunt and let Arthur know as soon as he could. Arthur didn't think any more about it for a couple of days, and didn't even mention it to Mary until the phone rang. It was David, who told him that the cottage was available from the following Saturday for a fortnight if they wanted it, but that he had to know immediately or no later than the following day. Mary thought it would be a good idea, as she had never been to Wales and had heard that it was very beautiful. So without any further delay, Arthur phoned David back and told him that they would take the cottage. As there was no public transport within miles of the cottage, they decided to hire a car for the fortnight. On Saturday they collected the car, got it filled up with petrol and oil, and set off down the M4 motorway towards the Severn Bridge and South Wales. The cottage was in a village called Penole, near Cardigan, on the west coast of Wales. They had been told to get the key from a Mr. Di Davis, the landlord of the Penole Arms, just down the road from the cottage. Mr. Davis, a very jolly and helpful man, gave them the keys and told them where the cottage was.
Dialogue.
This road seems to go on forever. And it's getting dark, too. That last signpost said Penole was only 5 miles. And it seems to me we've done 7 already. We must have got lost again.
Look, we're coming to a village now.
Oh,
Yes, there's the sign. Penole.
thank God. I don't think I could have driven any further. David said the cottage would be a little difficult to find in the dark. Now, let's see. I wonder where the Pernole Arms is.
It must be that place there, by the crossroads.
Ah, yes. Well, let's go over and see Mr. Davis. Excuse me, please. Are you Mr. Davis?
Yes, that's right. What can I do for you?
We've come to stay at...
Ah, you must be David Jones's friend. My wife's got the keys. Winnie! Winnie!
Oh,
Ah, here she is. These are the people from London.
oh, how do you do? Just staying for a fortnight, are you?
Yes, we can't afford to stay any longer, I'm afraid.
Well, now, I've told the milkman to deliver tomorrow. Just leave a note out telling him what you want. I expect he'll be there at about 8:30.
Oh, thank you very much, Mrs. Davis. By the way, could you tell us where the village shop is?
Well, you're too late for it now. But he'll be open in the morning. It's just up the road, next to the chapel.
Where exactly is the cottage?
If you'll come outside, I'll show you. Now, if you go down this hill here, there's a sharp bend to the right about 300 yards down the road. Don't go any further than that. The entrance to the drive's just before it. Drive very carefully, otherwise you'll land up in the stream.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Davis. I expect we'll be seeing you again.
Oh, and there's one other thing. Be careful of your head in the hall. The ceiling's a bit low. Good night, then.
Good night, and thanks.
Slow down, Arthur. We must be nearly there.
Look, who's driving, you or me?
Oh!
Now look what you've made me do. We're in the stream. It's no good. It won't budge. You'll have to get out and help me push it.
Oh, no! My feet are soaking.
Never mind your feet. Can't you push any harder? Come on. There we are. Oh, well done. I'm sorry I shouted at you.
Here at last. Oh, Arthur, look at all the roses round the door.
Doesn't look bad, does it? How'd you get, love?
No, you go first and see if you can find the light switch.
Okay. Ouch!
What on earth's the matter, Arthur?
I banged my head on the ceiling. That's what's the matter.
Chapter 12. Preserving the Environment. Section 1. After a somewhat disastrous beginning, Arthur and Mary's holiday was a mixture of delight and frustration. On the one hand, on the sunny days that began their holiday, they really appreciated the peace and quiet of rural Wales after the noise and bustle of London. The beach was only 10 minutes' drive from the cottage, and they were able to swim and sunbathe in surroundings which contrasted rather sharply with the seaside resorts of southern England, with their neon lights and tawdry commercialism. Towards the end of their stay, however, there were 1 or 2 wet days when they found themselves more or less prisoners in the cottage. They couldn't even move the car because the wheels just spun in the mud. On the evening before they were due to leave, Arthur telephoned his mother in Applefield. She suggested that they should make a slight detour on their return and stay in Applefield for 1 night or perhaps 2 before going back to Earl's Court. After making sure the cottage was clean and tidy, they handed the key back to Mr. Davis on the Saturday morning, and after a pleasant drive through the centre of Wales and then through the Cotswolds, they arrived in Applefield at about tea-time. As they drove round the village green towards Arthur's parents' house, they noticed a number of posters stuck on trees and garden gates saying, "Save Applefield from motorway vandalism." They wondered what this was all about, and were surprised to see the same poster in the Newton sitting-room window. When they got in, they found that the only person in the house was Jennifer, home for one of the few free weekends she had during her training as a nurse. She explained that her parents had both gone to a meeting in the village hall to do with the matter that had caused all the posters in the village. Apparently, the Department of the Environment had published plans for a new motorway, which the villagers feared would go right through the village green and virtually split Applefield into 2. The whole village was up in arms about it, and they were determined to do everything in their power to get the Department of the Environment to think again. Arthur told Mary that his father often got bees in his bonnet about matters of this kind. "It's probably only a storm in a teacup," Arthur said. "And talking of teacups, Jennifer, wouldn't it be a good idea if you made us some tea?" Dialogue.
Ah, Arthur, Mary, nice to see you both. How was your holiday?
Hello, Dad. Hello, Mum. It was fine, thanks. Except when it rained and we couldn't get the car to move.
That's funny. We haven't had a drop of rain here, have we, dear?
No, it's been glorious. We've had tea in the garden every day for the last fortnight.
Trust Arthur to find the one place in Britain where it's been raining.
Oh.
Did you have a good trip down, dear?
Yes, it was very quick, actually, especially on the motorway.
Don't talk to me about motorways. I expect Jennifer's told you where we've been this afternoon and why.
Yes, we noticed the posters stuck up all round the village. But do you seriously think you can make the ministry change their minds?
Well, we'll have a damned good try. After all, those people in Essex managed to make them think again over the 3rd London airport. Really, the difficult thing is to get everybody to rally round.
How did you find out about it in the first place?
Well, it was 4 weeks ago, and there were these chaps on the village green with tape measures and coloured sticks and God knows what.
Yes, I was taking down the curtains in our bedroom. They needed a wash, you see. They hadn't been done since last spring. Where was I? Oh, yes, these men. Well, I saw them drive up in an official-looking van, and they got all their stuff out of the back. I knew they weren't local, because I'd never seen them before. You know, Mary, with Jack being a doctor, we know everybody round here.
Yes, well, your mother called me, and I'd known for some time that there was going to be a motorway somewhere round here, so I went over and asked them.
What did they say?
Well, they were most rude. Treated me as if I was the village idiot and told me to mind my own business.
Good Lord. What did you do then?
Ah, well, I had one up my sleeve there. I came straight in and got on the phone to old Nigel Fairweather, chap I knew at college, you know, who's actually quite high up in the ministry. He told me, off the record, of course, that my suspicions were right. So I wrote to our new MP and got him to ask a question in the House, and that was it.
Well, Dad, best of luck. It makes you think, doesn't it? The planners don't seem to bother about ordinary people.
No, they certainly don't.
Chapter 13. The Police and Crime. Section 1.
Arthur and Mary enjoyed their short stay in Applefield, but decided to return to Earl's Court late on the Sunday night, as they had very little money left, and Mary wanted to go to work the next day. Moreover, the people from whom they had hired the car wanted it to be returned on Monday morning. The longer they kept it, the more it would cost them. They arrived outside their flat at about 11 o'clock at night. Mary went in first, while Arthur started to unload the luggage from the car. He had just taken the cases from the boot when Mary came running out of the front door in tears, calling to Arthur to come quickly. Arthur could hardly believe his eyes when he saw what a state the flat was in. The living room seemed to have been hit by a tornado. All the cupboards had been emptied, the furniture had been overturned, the carpet pulled back. Their hi-fi equipment, which they'd had for only a month, had disappeared, and the television set was also gone. After a few minutes, Mary stopped crying, and Arthur told her that he was going to ring the police, which he did straight away. They told him to leave everything as it was until they had a chance to look at what had happened and to look for fingerprints and signs of how the thieves had got in. Arthur was thankful that he'd taken out an insurance policy against fire and theft a couple of months before. He consoled Mary by telling her that even if the burglar was not caught and they never saw their property again, they would receive compensation.
Dialogue.
Ah, that must be them now. I'll go and let them in.
Mr. Newton?
That's right. Do come in.
I'm Detective Sergeant Thompson from the Earl's Court Police.
How do you do? This is my wife.
Good evening, madam. Oh, dear. They have left the place in a mess, haven't they? Now, everything's exactly as you found it, is it? You haven't touched anything, have you?
No, we've left everything just as it was.
Well, that's good. We don't like things to be disturbed. As I understand it, you've just come back from your holidays. Is that right?
Yes, we arrived home about half an hour ago. We've been away since a fortnight yesterday.
I see. Did you remember to cancel your papers in the milk?
Oh, yes. I told the milkman on the Saturday when I paid him, and you sorted the papers, didn't you, Arthur?
Yes, that's right.
Did you tell your neighbours you were going away?
No, we don't really know our neighbours terribly well. We tried to have a word with the landlady downstairs, but she was out. I think she may have gone away too.
Oh, well, I'll have a word with her later on, if she's in. Now, I'll just have a look round to see if I can see how they got in.
Do you think you'll find any fingerprints, Sergeant?
Well, sir, we might, but quite frankly, I don't think that'll help us very much. This isn't what you'd call a professional job. Is that the bathroom?
Yes, that's right.
Ah, come and have a look. This is the window they came through. Look, it's wide open, and you can easily get in by standing on top of that coal shed. Are you sure you fastened it before you left?
Yes, I made a point of checking every window just before we left.
Ah, yes, these old windows. They're an open invitation to the burglar. Look, right there. That's the place where he stuck his knife in, and he probably walked out through the front door.
Oh, dear.
Are you insured, sir?
Yes, luckily.
Well, that's all right then, isn't it? Let's have a look round the rest of the flat. Now, obviously you haven't had time to check through all your property, but if you could pop round to the station tomorrow with a full list of what's missing and the value of everything. By the way, you should let the insurance people know straight away. They like to be informed about these things as soon as possible. And the sooner you tell them, the quicker you'll get your compensation.
Okay, I'll do that.
Oh, look. There's one big thumbprint on the mirror over the fireplace. I'll just take that before I go.
Oh, that's what you do with it, is it? I've often wondered.
Ah, there you are, all finished. Well, I'll say good night now. Don't forget about the list, will you?
No, I won't. Good night, and thank you.
Chapter 14. A Visit to a Factory. Section 1.
Arthur and Mary never got their property back, but they were compensated in full by the insurance company. Arthur went to the hardware shop to buy new locks for the windows, and it took him all day to fit them. The following day was the first day of the autumn term, and Arthur had to be there at 9 o'clock in order to register, listen to the principal's address, and collect his programme from the course tutor. One of the things that Arthur noticed on his new programme was that in this, his second year, a number of visits to various firms had been arranged. In the second week of term, they were to visit a car factory near Oxford. Arthur was looking forward to this, as it would make a change from the normal routine, and surprisingly enough, it was something he'd never done before. They were to assemble at 9 outside the main entrance of the Polly, where a coach would be waiting to take them to Oxford. They would arrive at Oxford at 11:30, and then be free until 2 o'clock, when they were to go back to the coach in order to get to the factory at 2:30. Arthur rang up an old school friend of his, who was in his last year at the university, and arranged to meet him as soon as he arrived. The day of the visit turned out to be fine and sunny, and they all admired the autumn tints as they drove through the undulating countryside towards the ancient university city. Arthur's friend, John Phelps, was waiting at the bus station at Gloucester Green in the middle of Oxford. They had coffee in John's room in college, and then his friend showed Arthur round the university. They had lunch in the Trout, a 13th century pub by the river, after which Arthur rejoined his party at the coach. After a short drive, they arrived at the main gate of the factory, where they reported to the gatekeeper, who directed them to the office building. A young management trainee, who had himself been on the same course as Arthur, welcomed them and explained what the plans for the afternoon were. Firstly, they were to go on a conducted tour of the works, seeing first the engines being assembled, then the main production line, next the paint shop, and finally an experimental shop, where teams of workers assemble the whole car, instead of each worker doing one repetitive job. Last of all, they were to have a cup of tea and an informal discussion with the works manager and the personnel manager in the staff canteen.
Dialogue.
Right now, I think you should have a fairly good idea of what goes on by now, and time's getting on, so we'd better get back to the staff canteen, where you're to meet Mr. Lawrence, the works manager, and Mr. Stubbington, the personnel manager.
Well, could I have your attention, please? I hope you enjoyed your visit round the works, and I'm sure you've got lots of questions you're dying to ask us. So, Fire away.
What particularly interested me was your new experimental shop. Do you find that production is as efficient there as on the normal production line?
Well, that's an interesting one. It's early days yet, but certainly the workers seem to be far happier working as a team like that. It appears to give greater job satisfaction all round. As to the economics of the thing, we'll just have to wait and see.
Was this a management idea, or did it come from the unions?
A little bit of both, really. As you know, this idea originated in Scandinavia. I happened to be chatting with one of the shop stewards one day when the idea cropped up in the conversation. So, after some discussion, we put it up to the board, who gave us the go-ahead for the pilot scheme you saw this afternoon.
What are labour relations like in your firm?
Well, we've had our ups and downs, just like everybody else. And you're not to think we're completely trouble-free. A few years ago, for example, we had a lot of trouble with demarcation disputes. But to give the unions their due, that sort of trouble, touch wood, is becoming a thing of the past. Our main problems now are over productivity agreements.
How do you decide when it's time to discontinue production of a particular model of car and launch a new one to replace it?
Oh dear, I was afraid somebody would ask that. There are all sorts of imponderables here. Some models, like the Beetle and the Mini, seem to go on and on. It's just a question of demand, really. As to new models, that again is a really difficult one. It depends on things like new developments in the design field, in technology, the general financial situation, and so on. Then there's the unpredictable demands of fashion. I couldn't really answer your question in a sentence, I'm afraid.
I've read that you're bringing out a new 1500 soon. Could you tell us when that's coming on the market?
Well, it was to have been out last month, but the firm that produces the instruments has just had a strike, which has held us up, unfortunately.
Any more questions? No? Well, it's been very interesting having you all along. You've asked some really good questions. Now, I think you'll find that your coach is waiting outside, so I'll wish you a very good afternoon.
Chapter 15. Looking for a Job. Section 1. As Arthur was coming to the end of his course at the Earl's Court Polytechnic, he began to wonder what he would be doing after it was all over. During the weekends of the summer term, he would sit in his flat going through the job columns of the Observer and the Sunday Times, looking at all the possible openings in industry or commerce that might start him on the road to becoming a tycoon. First he might start modestly as a trainee in management, then go on to become a junior executive, and then end up as a man with a plum job with a company car, an expense account, and all the perks of a high-powered job. He would imagine himself sitting in the back of a long chauffeur-driven car, either issuing instructions to his subordinates over the car telephone, or dictating letters and memoranda into a dictating machine. Or he would be sitting at an impressive leather-topped mahogany desk, with 3 telephones, an expensive carpet on the floor, and a pretty secretary sitting opposite him, pencil poised, waiting to take down that important directive that would affect the lives of millions. Or again, he would be flying to New York on his way to an important international trade conference. His fantasies were endless. The realities of the situation were, however, somewhat different. He was at that moment an averagely impoverished student, living partly on his young wife's earnings, with just about enough to pay the rent, rates, and fuel bills, and to eat modestly, at least until his course finished at the end of the following month, when his student days would come to an end. He had already filled in at least 15 application forms, written as many letters of application, and had received back 6 postcards informing him politely that the post he had applied for had already been filled. Another 7 had written saying that his communication was acknowledged and would be receiving attention in due course. The rest of his efforts had met with no response whatsoever. He was beginning to feel that if he'd been a little younger, he might have stood a better chance. So, despite Arthur's fantasies, he wasn't feeling especially confident when he started to write a letter to a firm called Robinson's Electronics, who were advertising for a management trainee to start in September at their headquarters in North London. Dialogue.
Ah, Mr. Newton, would you go in now, please?
Oh, me? Yes, right.
Let me see. You're Mr. Newton, are you?
Yes, that's right.
Well, do sit down. You may smoke if you wish.
Thank you.
Now, my name's Pratt, and I'm the assistant to the managing director. And these 2 gentlemen here are Mr. Hardcastle, the personnel manager, and Mr. Gibbs, one of our directors. Now, Mr. Newcomb, I'd like you to tell us, if you would, what it is that makes you want to come and work for us.
Well, I've noticed that electronics seems to be one of the growth industries at the moment, and,
Yes?
well, I happened to be just glancing through the Financial Times the other day, and happened to come across your company report.
Mm.
So I read it, and it seemed to me that your record over the past year had been quite an impressive one.
It's nice to know somebody reads our report, eh, Mr. Pratt?
Yes, indeed. So, you know the sort of things we make and the kind of people we sell them to, do you?
I know you make electronic equipment and computers, and I imagine that banks, insurance companies, and other large firms are your main customers.
Well, that's part of it, of course. But there's a host of other applications in the electronics field. But if you did come and work for us, you'd soon learn. I certainly haven't got time to explain them all to you now. Now, Mr. Hardcastle, I'm sure you've got lots of things you want to ask Mr. Newman.
Newton.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Newton.
Yes, I wanted to ask you 1 or 2 questions about yourself that don't come out clearly in your application. For example, why did you wait so long before deciding to further your education after you left school? I noticed that it wasn't until you were nearing the end of your time working as a librarian in Middleford that you decided to take your A-levels and then go on to the management training course at Earl's Court.
Well, I don't know myself, really. I suppose I was short of confidence, really. It wasn't until later that I thought to myself, well, if others can get on, why on earth shouldn't I?
Good for you. You didn't really like working in a library, then?
It was quite pleasant, but not very demanding. It would have been better if I'd had something interesting to do. As it was, I was just a sort of dog's body there.
You'd have to do some pretty basic jobs here, you know, if we accepted you as a trainee.
Yes, but that would be different. Then I'd know where I was going.
Well, Mr. Newmark, that's all for the time being. Could you just wait outside for a bit, please? We'll call you in again later.
Well, gentlemen, what do you think?
Well, I like the chap. Seems to have had a bit of a rough passage at first. I think he knows what he's after now. I'd recommend taking him on and giving him a try.